Okay with that. So good morning, everyone. Welcome to our May education session on the future of Seattle. So just with it being Earth Month, it's kind of the huge legislative wins that we just had in the state legislature last week, and a lot of the leadership that is coming from the federal level. We wanted to look at a lot of that and kind of bring it back home to see what Seattle will look like in the year 2030. So a quick introduction on the format this morning. We have three great panelists here to talk about the work that they are doing now to create that future that Seattle wants to see for all of us. So we have Rob Johnson, the VP of Sustainability and Transportation with the Seattle Kraken and Climate Pledge Arena. We have Andrea Pratt, the Climate and Transportation Program Manager with OSE and the City of Seattle. And lastly, we have Colleen Echohawk, the Executive Director for the Chief Seattle Club. So I'm gonna let them give kind of more introductions later, but each will give a presentation, and then we should have around about 20 minutes for Q&A at the end. So the best way to ask those questions is in the chat function. And I'll be keeping an eye on that, as well as Anne Enomoto, my communications and engagement manager, to just track that, and I'll ask all of those questions at the end. So please don't be shy, get those questions in. But I'd like to just give kind of a brief introduction to the 2030 district and kind of why I thought this was a good idea to do with the future of Seattle. So the Seattle 2030 district is committed to transforming our city by significantly reducing the environmental impacts of buildings by the year 2030. And we're doing this because without this transformative change in the buildings and where we live and work, we are likely going to lose the climate battle in the Pacific Northwest. And so we feel that the 2030 district has a unique ability to connect and convene decision makers who can influence that corporate culture and help create policies that will help solve that climate crisis. So we're a public-private partnership. I say that as an important detail because in the past we've seen public sector programs lag. I think we've got a couple of people on the call who might know about some of those things. So when there's a change in administration, some things kind of change. So we're trying to work to create market-based solutions to achieve those goals, working with the private sector first, and then kind of go into the public sector to show what works. So we have 140 members now committed to these 2030 district goals, which is a 50% reduction in energy, water, and transportation emissions by the year 2030, with interim goals leading up to that. And then for new construction, it is a little bit different, and major renovations. We're looking to get to net zero by the year 2030, again, with some of those interim goals in between. So just as a comparison for new construction, that is about 25% better than code. So I mentioned the kind of the shared mission here of the district and kind of the goals that we have. And that's the main reason why a lot of building owners and developers like this district model, is because that goal is a district goal and not an individual building goal. So when building owners join, they commit to trying to achieve these goals. But a lot of buildings that we have in Seattle are older, so they might not actually be able to hit that 50% reduction. But we have a lot of newer buildings that can hopefully go above and beyond that. So on average, we're going to kind of lift the whole city up to that 50% reduction goal and put us on a path to climate stabilization. So this is the 2030 district. We are located kind of primarily in downtown Seattle and the surrounding neighborhoods. We have kind of 260 buildings committed to the district goals, and that's about 60 million square feet. And as I mentioned, we have 140 members that make up that, which is a variety of different folks in the commercial real estate industry. So I want to talk a little bit about the 2030 district's vision of the future. So in 2011, when we launched the 2030 district, we did a visioning exercise with our board of directors to see what they thought Seattle would look like in the year 2030. And imagine that they were writing to a friend or family to tell them about it. So we had some great postcards that came out of that. So I want to kind of go through some of them here. I don't expect you to read all of this, but I want to highlight some of the themes. So one of the big ones here, we did create the future. We have clean air, people walking and biking, people helping each other. There are no cars downtown. It's a peaceful city. Buildings are symbols of sustainability with solar, bike racks, green roofs, water collection, and EV charging. We have a denser, more beautiful skyline. We have community bikes to get around, net zero building high rises, a vibrant city with people biking and walking. We have bioswales in the streets. The air is clean, traffic is muted, and it's a safe place for children to play. So have a think about those things. I think many of those things have been achieved, but kind of on a small scale. We have buildings now with solar arrays on them. We have green roofs. We're close now to having the first large net zero building in South Lake Union. We have community bikes now. We have EV cars, which are becoming more and more popular with companies committing to achieving all electric vehicles by either 2025 or 2030. We have bioswales, and we even have some buildings with rainwater harvesting. But then take a look at some of those others. What would it take to achieve some of those things? No cars downtown, pedestrianized streets, clean air with no haze to see the mountains in the summer, net zero buildings at scale. How do we create affordable density in this city so that everyone could afford to live here? And perhaps a larger question is, how do we get people to help each other to enjoy the city? What do you envision the city to look like in the year 2030? When we did this exercise, it seemed like a long way off in 2011, but now it's just over 8 years away. So if you feel like sharing, put it in the chat what your vision is and how you feel like you might be able to help achieve that vision. And on that note, we're launching an energy roadmap design competition this summer, where we're going to take a couple of existing member buildings. We're still kind of working to finalize, and we want to show what it will take to get those buildings to go from their existing performance now to net zero energy by the year 2030. And the goal here is to just show that progression of planning and how you map out those upgrades over that 8 years to get to that goal. So our schedule here is, we're obviously announcing this today. In June, we'll open the competition for proposals. And then ideally, by the time October rolls around, we'll announce the winner at the 2021 Vision Awards on October 7th. So teams would be made up of ideally an architect, an engineer, and a general contractor, because we really want to show that this is a combined team effort to achieve this goal. So look out for more information on this to come. And lastly, just before I hand this over to the presenters, I'd like to thank our annual sponsors. Without them, it would be really hard to do a lot of the work that we do, particularly these education sessions. And the same goes for our 2030 district funders, Boeing, the Bullitt Foundation, and King County. They really provide our programmatic financing and help us do the great work that we do. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Rob Johnson, who is going to talk about the great work that they are doing at the Climate Pledge Arena. Let's stop sharing my screen so Rob, you can share yours.
Thank you, Matthew. Really excited to be here with you this morning. And I don't feel ashamed to admit that Andrea, Colleen, and I all ghost wrote Matthew those little postcards that your folks sent to us in the future, because that's the vision that the three of us have been working for most of our professional careers. Really grateful to be with you all this morning to share a little bit about the work of my organization, the Seattle Kraken and the Climate Pledge Arena. So hopefully you can all see my screen here. I'm just going to start with just a kind of a walkthrough of what we're trying to do here to become effectively the most climate friendly arena in the world. The Climate Pledge is a commitment from Amazon and several other large-scale companies around the world. Was founded with another nonprofit called Global Optimism to really achieve the Paris Climate Accords 10 years early in 2040. So it's a commitment for all organizations that join the Climate Pledge to be net zero by 2040. We are going to be the first arena to meet that challenge. And all three organizations, the arena, the Seattle Kraken, who's one of our major tenants, and our parent company, Oakview Group, who's the developer of the building, have all signed on to be part of the Climate Pledge. Our building is really interesting because we're taking this 1962 built historic roof, we're gutting it, we're digging a giant hole, suspending that roof up while we dig that giant hole, and building a brand new $1 billion plus arena underneath that historic roof and attaching it all back up. And that includes not only the landmark historic roof, but also these really great glass emulsions and original glass panels that are on the north side and the east and west sides of the building. All of those were taken out, cataloged, stored at a warehouse in Kent where all things get stored and warehoused, and then trucked back in and put back into their original place. So when you walk back into this building, it's going to feel like the same building that the Beatles played in the early 1960s, but it's going to have all the modern amenities that you would expect from a brand new arena being built in 2021, including huge commitments to climate. Those commitments start with us meeting the zero carbon certification from an organization called the International Living Futures Institute. Based out of the Bullitt building in Capitol Hill, ILFI has four main tenets if you're going to meet their zero carbon certification. The first thing you have to do is you have to eliminate all fossil fuels from the building. We did that. We were building a building. We had four major places where we were going to use natural gas. In 2019, we re-engineered the entire building, resubmitted all of our permits, and took all the natural gas out of that building and converted all of it to electric. Our friends, Andrea, at the Office of Sustainability have told me that that single action reduced the carbon footprint of all city-owned buildings in the city of Seattle by 5%. So we believe that we were the single largest action that the city could have done to meet their existing commitment to try to have the city facilities be carbon neutral by 2024, if I'm not mistaken. Andrea, is the goal. The second thing that you have to do to meet the ILFI certification is you have to have some visible on-site renewable energy. We're partnering with Unico and McKinstry, two sponsors of the 2030 district, to build solar panels in the atrium of our building. So this beautiful Alaska Airlines atrium is on the south side of the building. So where 70% of the folks who are entering into the building will enter. Across the street, we manage this 537 stall garage, the First Avenue garage. We're going to be cantilevering solar panels on top of that garage. And then up at our training center in Northgate, where the 52,000 square feet of solar that we're going to put up there will be, when it's installed, the largest single solar array in Washington State to support one facility. So those three components are going to generate more than a megawatt of energy for us to help ensure that we meet that second pillar of the ILFI net zero carbon standard. Pillar number 3 is you have to go out and procure the remainder of your energy from new renewable sources. So we're going to be partnering with our partners at Amazon to go out and build a new wind and solar plant somewhere ideally in the Pacific Northwest to wheel back to the grid enough energy to really call ourselves totally a net zero energy building. And then lastly, you have to track all of the carbon emissions associated with your building. You have to offset those emissions at the end of the year. And effectively, that's how you become certified net zero carbon by the International Living Futures Institute. So in order to do that, we have to track all the potatoes coming for the French fries, all the fans and artists coming to the building, the energy usage in the building, the water usage in the building, the waste hauling from the building. We have to run all of that through a giant spreadsheet, account for the carbon footprint of all of those component parts, and then kick out a total metric ton at the end of that and make sure that we invest in sequestration-based credible carbon offsets to ensure that we get to that carbon neutral goal. It is a huge, huge undertaking, and one of the 3 jobs that I do on a daily basis for the Climate Pledge Arena. So I'm really excited to talk to you about some of the other stuff that we're doing inside the building. We're also harvesting rainwater off of 1/4 of the roof. You guys may know that Paul Theory, the original architect for the arena, designed it as an homage to a traditional Coast Salish rain hat. We're taking that idea and paying it forward by collecting rainwater off the northwest quadrant of that 40,000 square foot roof, harvesting it and holding it in a 15,000 gallon underground cistern, and reusing that rainwater to resurface the ice for our nightly games and practices. We think that that's going to save us as much as 50,000 gallons annually from the Seattle City water stream, and will be a great way for us to, again, have a visible component of sustainability that a lot of our fans will be able to grasp and hopefully replicate at home. In addition to that, we're going to be banning single-use plastics starting on day 1, with one exception. Our sugar-sweetened beverage partner, whoever that may be, doesn't quite have the global supply chain yet for us to be able to ban those plastic water bottles, but we're going to phase those out by 2024. But everything else that you get in the building will be totally compostable or recyclable. That's important to us because you can see Puget Sound from our front door, right? And the microplastics impact on the health of our native salmon and orca population has been well documented. So the more we can do to eliminate plastics from our waste stream, the healthier our Puget Sounds, our rivers and lakes are going to be. And not only that, I heard a really alarming statistic the other day. The average North American ingests about a credit card size worth of microplastics every week. It's plastics leaching off those little plastic bags that you use for produce. It's plastics leaching off of all kinds of things that, like we put in our shampoo or our body wash. All of that stuff is undoubtedly having an impact on human health. So the more we can eliminate those from our systems, the better. We're going to invest in sustainable and healthy food with 75% of our ingredients coming from within a 300-mile radius. Housecraft wine and beer from Washington and Oregon. A lot of vegan and vegetarian options, which is not only on brand for the Pacific Northwest, but also really great for the environment. And a lot of other things that you're going to see inside the building that'll really speak to, I think, sustainability from the food and beverage component. We're going to be a functionally zero waste building. This is where we stand on the shoulders of our partners at the down at the Lumen Field and at T-Mobile Ballpark, where we really have seen this innovation in the Northwest faster than any other sports arenas around North America. But like them, we'll aim to divert less than 3% of our waste to landfills and make sure that the overwhelming majority of our waste goes to composting and recycling facilities, making us a functionally zero waste building. When you do the analysis of the total carbon footprint of our building, we think as much as 70% of that carbon footprint is going to come from transportation, artists, people, stuff coming back and to and from the building. The way that we're planning to really reduce that carbon footprint is by effectively subsidizing public transit trips for all home hockey games. We're making a $7 million investment in the monorail to connect you that last mile from downtown to the building's front door. We're making a $40 million investment in the neighborhood with biking, walking, and other improvements in Uptown to make sure that fans can safely get access to and from our buildings. And we're really taking an innovative approach by analyzing where all of our fans are coming from and trying to encourage them to think about their behavior based off of the choices that are available to them. So you can see we've got a subset of our fans, about 15%, who live so far away that they have no choice but to drive. We've got another subset who live so close that they're absolutely going to walk. But these folks who are in the suburban Crescent, Seattle area, who live within about a 45-minute drive or a 1-hour transit ride, we're going to do everything we can to encourage those folks to get on the train, to get in van pools, to get in carpools, to get on buses, to really think about how their travel time and their environmental footprint can really be changed through education, through incentives, and through other mechanisms. It's part of our commitment to have a set of strategies on day one that we think will be really informative to help us really become the most climate friendly arena in the world. But we also know we're going to constantly try to improve. So we want to have a set of strategies on day 366 that's different from it is on day one. And we're really excited to have our fans take this journey with us. We've seen time and again, our friends in local and state and federal governments have a lot more success when they have positive influencing messages as opposed to regulatory messages. So we aim to inspire our fans to take this journey with us. And we're really excited to be what we think is the most innovative sports and entertainment facility in North America, if not the world. So Matthew, there's my sustainability presentation in 10 minutes or less. I turn it over now back to you and look forward to answering questions from the audience as we get further along in the morning.
Perfect. Thanks, Rob. And dead on time. I like that in a presenter. I think the walking map could probably be expanded a little bit because I noticed my house was slightly outside of that, and I'll probably be walking down to the stadium. So I might be an outlier though, but good to know. So we're going to hand it over to Andrea just while we're talking about transportation. I was going to kind of go through what the future of Seattle transportation looks like.
Thank you so much. I'm trying to share my screen here. First, I just want to say, wow, I am so impressed. Rob, we miss you on City Council. It's just so inspiring to see what you all are working on the Climate Pledge arena. And I just feel like, you know, if we had a crown jewel in Seattle, that is the sparkling emerald in the middle of our city. So kudos to you and your team. I just want to take a moment to say I'm super excited to be here. I was joking with my husband. I go, wow, I'm on a panel this morning with some pretty heavy hitters. So I'm really excited to be here with my esteemed colleagues. So my name is Andrea Pratt. I work at the City of Seattle in the Office of Sustainability and Environment, and I manage our transportation electrification program. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about our new blueprint today, but also offer a little context of why we're doing this work and why we think it's so important. So this is a snapshot of our most recent greenhouse gas inventory for the city. And what it shows is, you know, as Rob alluded to, road transportation accounts for the lion's share of Seattle's greenhouse gas emissions. This graphic shows, you know, in 2030, we have an interim goal to reduce our transportation emissions by 83%, and that's on the road to being carbon neutral by 2050. And as you can see from this graph on the left-hand side, you know, we've almost flatlined on our progress despite making historic investments in transit and increasing transit ridership. So at the end of the day, we have a lot of work to do, but the good news is we have a path to get there. I recently reviewed the Washington State's clean energy strategy. And for those of you who are interested in that type of thing, I really recommend taking a look at that because I think it's really important. And what it talks about was the pathway to basically zero carbon by 2050 in transportation is a combination of aggressive efficiency measures and aggressive decarbonization. And what I mean by that is efficiency is reducing our fossil fuels, similar to buildings, right? You know, building tune-ups, building benchmarking. So we want to reduce how many miles we drive. We have many programs that help with efficiency, whether that's commute trip reduction, transportation demand management, you know, expanding walking and biking and transit ridership is absolutely crucial. We need increased density. You know, there's a Paris recently became a 15-minute city where basically you could take transit or kind of get around to any point in the city within 15 minutes. And we're looking at doing something similar in Seattle, but what that would require is, you know, looking at denser land use. And so I think that sometimes we, energy efficiency in transportation is kind of pitted against decarbonization. And I just want to show that This is really hand in glove, and they're very complementary, and we need to do both. And decarbonization is actually removing the carbon from the energy source itself. And that's what our transportation electrification blueprint is all about. And another example of that is the bill that just passed at the Washington State Legislature, passing a clean fuel standard, which we desperately needed in our state. So really excited. This is an exciting time to be in this work. So I'm probably preaching to the choir on this one, but as we all know, Seattle City Light has very clean electricity from our abundant hydropower resources, and no coal or natural gas in their mix at all. And for the small segments that aren't renewable, they purchase offsets. So for all intents and purposes, the electricity is carbon free. And what this means is anything we electrify in Seattle is 100% reduction in tailpipe emissions, but also carbon pollution. So transportation electrification is kind of a no-brainer in the Pacific Northwest. And before I dive into the plan, I just want to set some context of why we think, TE, or transportation electrification, is so important. This is a map that's published by the Department of Health. It's the Health Disparities Map, and it compares different communities across our state for health disparities. And there's different layers that you can toggle on and off, and this layer happens to be diesel pollution impacts. And as you can see in South Seattle, we have a big problem with air pollution. And we feel that by targeting investments in these impacted areas, we can not only reduce diesel pollution, but improve public health and start accruing benefits to these communities that have been really disproportionately harmed by environmental pollution. And in that vein, we see electrification of port and commercial diesel fleets as really key opportunities to improve the health outcomes of our communities in the South. The American Lung Association recently published a report showing Washington state specific impacts of broad transportation electrification, which was really cool because we had not have state specific numbers before. And under this scenario, Washington state will save 1.4 trillion with a T in health costs. Hundreds of premature deaths, asthma attacks, and missed days of work. So TE is really critical to human health. And finally, TE investments can create clean jobs. There have been a ton of reports and studies on this, from the National Renewable Energy Lab to the LA Clean Tech Incubator, and even Biden's climate plan, that shows investments in infrastructure really can create high road clean jobs, which is kind of front and center, especially now post-COVID. We really wanted to make job creation a centerpiece of this plan. So about a year ago, well, actually 18 months ago, we had a little pause for the pandemic. Mayor Durkin asked OSC, Seattle City Light, and the Seattle Department of Transportation to work together with other city departments to create a new citywide transportation electrification plan. And it was a really great process. We worked across 8 different departments and dozens of city staff. And we really co-created this plan. And what this plan does is it sets a vision for 2030, which I'll get to at the end, and then establishes some pretty aggressive policy goals for 2030. And then we outline some near-term 2-year actions that we'll take to make progress towards those goals. And so our policy goals for 2030, or what we're calling our North Star, is 100% of shared mobility will be electric. So this is taxis, Uber, Lyft, car share, scooters, bikes, all of that will be electric by 2030. Second is 9 out of 10 personal trips will be zero emission. Now, these trips could be made by walking, biking, an electrified transit trip, or if none of those other options are available or feasible, in an electric vehicle. We're really excited about this because I think this goal kind of underscores how we're trying to mesh efficiency and decarbonization. The intent here is to wave a magic wand and turn all of these cars that we have into electric. We really need to, under the guise of building back better, we need to understand how we can make our system as efficient as possible and then decarbonize it. So getting folks around not in cars is a huge, huge piece of that. And I love this goal because it really reflects that. Third is 30% of goods delivery will be zero emission. This is the first goal that I've seen at a city level targeting goods. And as we know from the explosive growth of e-commerce and Amazon and others, this is really important and a growing cause of congestion in our cities. So we thought that was very important to add. 100% of our city fleet will be fossil fuel free. We've been working on this for a long time. So we're making really great progress through aggressive electrification and then using renewable biofuels as a bridge for things like fire trucks that are coming down the line a couple years down the road. Another really, really exciting thing that we're working on is establishing a large area of the city as a green and healthy street. But what that really means is a zero transportation emission area. So think of like Barcelona superblocks or the ultra low emission zone in London. This was stemmed from a C40 declaration. So Seattle's part of many climate organizations, both nationally and internationally. And C40 is a group of global cities that have committed to climate action and work together on how we action our goals. And so we're working closely with LA, New York City, San Francisco, and other global cities to really program this and roll it out, start rolling out different aspects of it in the next couple of years. So we're really excited about that. And then finally, you know, if we're going to electrify all of these things in transportation and on the building side, we have to make sure that the infrastructure required to support that transition is installed and operational and does not become a bottleneck. And luckily, we have Seattle City Light as a really great partner in that. So this is my last slide. I did not compare notes with Matthew before this, so I was really excited to see that a lot of the postcards that he shared earlier really kind of, you know, set the same vision. And so basically, in our future, everything that moves people, goods, and services in and around the city is electrified. And the air is clean. People are taking electrified transit both to work, to the Kraken game, and to other destinations. A robust bike lane network is built out so folks can get around, but also so we could use cargo bikes to deliver packages. And things like you might not think about, but electric trash trucks, electric utility trucks. You know, this is the vision that we see for Seattle, and we're really excited to roll up our sleeves and get to work. So that is all I had, and I look forward to your questions at the end.
Thank you, Andrea. Yeah, we probably should have compared notes a little bit at the end there. Some solid alignment. But I think that just goes to show, I think the vision that Seattleites have had for the city hasn't changed a lot in that time. We're just really trying to figure out how to get there and what policy levers and incentives we really need to use to get there. So with that, last person, I'm super excited to hear from Colleen. I've known her for a few years now and just an inspirational person. And so I'm super excited to hear what she has to say. And she's doing some great work with the Chief Seattle Club as well on their building. So with that, I'll hand it over to you, Colleen.
Great. Well, thank you so much for having me. And I'm just going to share my screen. I don't know which one I'm sharing yet. Let's see that. Maybe I'm not going to share my screen. Hold on one second. Sorry about that. It's great to be with you all, and you know, incredibly inspired by both Andrea and Rob. I know that I am like so ready to hang out with people and cannot wait to go to a game. Rob and I have a shared experience of going to a Seahawks game together, and it's going to be good, you guys. I just can't. I am ready to get to hang out with people and do stuff. So I hope you're with me. All right. Well, I am struggling to share my screen for some reason, so I will not. But I wanted to share with you a vision about the way that I am seeing the the way that we can look and should look in 2030. I'll start with telling you a little bit of the story of the Coast Salish community that we're all very, lucky to live in. I consider myself very lucky to live in this very beautiful place. We know that the Coast Salish communities, the Lummi actually share it very beautifully, and I invite you to look it up. They talk about the relationship to orcas, the relationship to these animals are actually connected to the way that they think about family, the way that they think about the health of the ocean. And I don't know about you, but when we heard about the mama orca carrying around the dead baby orca, that struck me to my core. And when we think about the way that we absolutely have to swerve as a society, the way that we have to make changes, I believe it's vital for us to be thinking about the local community here and the way that they see the health and well-being of our city. And my puppy's joining me. Sorry about this. But we know what I would consider a healthy Seattle is when we know that the Puget Sound is abundant with orcas. If we know that the Puget Sound is abundant with orcas, then we know that salmon is abundant in our rivers and our streams. And then we know that the air is clean. We know that that child in the South End who has struggled so much with asthma, and I so appreciated your slide on that, Andrea, because I don't think we're just beginning, I think, to understand the impact of the changes we have to make on our health for our young people, for our elders, and the impact on our economy is we just are still not quite there to understand it. And I think that slide was just so important, because that child in the South End who experiences multiple trips to the emergency room, who experiences ongoing days away from school because of those health outcomes, in the 2030 that I'm imagining, that air is clean. We are all enjoying the abundant salmon, and the orcas are abundant. And we have such interesting relationships with both Muckleshoot and Suquamish, who have who have government to government relationships with the city of Seattle. It's important for us to be considering the impact of those two tribes and the way that we can be working together for a future that sustains us all. My work has been focused for the past 7 years on supporting Native people who are experiencing homelessness. We know that if you are a Native person in Seattle, you're going to experience homelessness at about 15 times more than any other person. We make up around 15% of the homeless population, and yet less than 1% of the total population. So an incredible disparity, an incredible amounts of Native people who are experiencing homelessness. Really, I think it's a sort of this moral outrage that we need to grapple with in our country, when we know that Native people around the country have the highest rates of homelessness. We are some of the folks who are very unlikely to be building housing, to be involved in the work of climate justice. I think for a large part because some of us are still in quite a bit of survival mode, trying to just make it and be in housing. So my agency about 5 years ago said, we have to do more than just provide a day center. We have a health center. We do all kinds of day-to-day stuff to support someone experiencing homelessness, and we need to be thinking about what we should do. And part of it was to build housing. And I want to invite you to think about the people that you are interacting with in your work. We know that this kind of work that we're all in right now, the work of climate justice or in development and urban planning, it's largely dominated by a lot of the same people in Seattle. I want to invite you to think about what does that mean for your work, and what does that mean for your outcomes. I know that when I went originally to the city of Seattle, you were there, Rob, but you had nothing to do with this. I was really laughed out of the door. Like they just laughed at me, or like literally they laughed and said, you know what, you cannot build housing. You don't really, they said, you don't belong here. You don't have the capacity. You don't have the agency. You don't know how to develop housing. And I remember walking back to my building in Pioneer Square, back to my agency, and feeling so incredibly frustrated. And I also feel like there was it was sort of like a line in the sand. And I'm happy to report that now we're building over $180 million in housing projects in 3 different areas around the city. And it's important to share that story with you, because I am not I was not a trained in building housing. I'm not trained as an urban planner or environmental design. However, we've done it, and we're doing a really great job. We opened up a building in October in Pioneer Square. The building itself is embedded with Coast Salish design. I also want to invite you to think about, where do you see Coast Salish design? Rob, thank you so much for the reminder that the Climate Pledge Arena actually had the intent to be the Coast Salish cedar hat. We need to talk more about that in general as a city, because it's really beautiful, and it can help us think about ways that we can incorporate Coast Salish design into this building. But we are in other buildings. We are a city that's named after a chief. We need to be thoughtful and intent on ensuring that Coast Salish design is a part of our everyday work here in Seattle. Our building that opens up in October, and you can, if you go to the Chief Seattle Club website and click on housing, and then the all building is the one that's opening in October. All is a Lushootseed name for, it's a Lushootseed word for home. It'll be the first building in downtown core that has a Lushootseed name. Lushootseed is the language of the Coast Salish communities here, and is another reminder of the justice work that we have to do in design and in the work of climate justice. So I invite you to take a look at that. I invite you to really think about the tables that you're sitting at. Are they diverse? Are they representative of the whole community? And tear down those barriers and the gatekeeping that happens because of educational backgrounds or professional backgrounds. We need to be inviting, Black and Indigenous and people of color communities into these buildings that we're creating, into these new stories that we're imagining together, so that we do have outcomes that really represent the whole community. So thank you so much. I'm sorry that my slides would not share, but you can take a look at the Chief Seattle Club website and see our new buildings that are coming up, the All building in Pioneer Square, Sacred Medicine House in Lake City, and a brand new project that we don't have a name for yet in the North Seattle College site, along with a longhouse. So the longhouse is going to be a really cool one too. So thank you so much. And thank you, Matthew, for inviting me today.
Yeah, thanks, Colleen. The joys of technology sometimes when they don't work. Or just whenever I go to share my screen, I have so many tabs open trying to find the actual one that I want. Is like finding a piece in a puzzle. So great presentations. For everyone on the call, if you do have some questions, type them in the chat. I know we had one come through. I certainly have a few as well. But I'll start with the one that we do have. So Seattle is one of the first cities in North America to incorporate wastewater heat reclamation into energy solutions. Has the Climate Pledge Arena considered this as a solution?
We haven't at this point, Matthew. I know just a tiny bit about this from being on some tours with Dennis Hayes of the Bullet Building and the challenges that they had to do in order to get some permitting components for that wastewater heating system that they've got up there. So we have not looked at that as an option. Right now, we're focused on our solar panels and the wheeling of new renewable energy back to our our grid in order to fully power the building by renewable energy. But I'd love to connect with folks offline about how we could be analyzing wastewater heat capture to see how that might reduce some of our energy consumption.
Great, thanks, Rob. I'm certainly happy to chat with you. We've been working a lot with King County to set up their pilot program around sewage heat recovery as well. Andrea, quick question for you. I think Rob was the one who mentioned positive reinforcement rather than regulation to get there, to get people to the stadium. How is the city kind of going to look at a similar thing for their transportation goals?
Yeah, that's a really great question. You know, our partners at SDOT have really been national leaders in getting folks to mode shift or to shift onto more sustainable modes of transportation. And so I think that we are going to build off of the great work that SDOT has already done and also incorporate the decarbonization piece, right? And I think that our 2030 goals, like the 9 out of 10 trips goal, really underscores how we're trying to lead with efficiency. You know, SDOT has a campaign, the Sal the Salmon, Flip Your Trip kind of campaign. And so we're looking to do probably something in that vein and do some outreach and education on the best sustainable choices that folks can make to get around. And that is usually not in a car. And we don't want you taking car trips if there are other options. But I think we also need to be realistic that some folks use vehicles to make a living. My husband's a carpenter, right? Anybody that's carrying tools or stuff around with them is probably not going to take the bus. And so how can we look at transportation as a system, make it more efficient as humanly possible, and then decarbonize it, and recognizing that, you know, there's a lot of nuance there, and some of that we don't fully understand, and we're looking at different data sources where we can kind of figure out, you know, why are folks driving? Is it to work? Well, they have another option. Are they driving because they're an Uber driver, or they're delivering food, or, you know, that's another policy intervention that we have to look at. So we're really trying to take kind of a comprehensive look at transportation and how we get folks around and making sure that's as efficient as possible. And then we're going to decarbonize it.
Perfect. Yeah, I think transportation is going to be an interesting issue, at least for the next several months, as people start returning to work, and there's still a lot of kind of apprehension about public transit. So a lot of the work that we're trying to do is get the word out of the great work that Sound Transit has been doing to keep public transit safe and get more people to realize that. And hopefully with the summer coming, more people will be biking and walking to work, and that trend will continue as well. We have a question for Colleen here. How would you recommend Coast Salish influence in design without cliche moves by non-native designers?
Great question. You know, I've been working as a consultant with the Seattle Aquarium, and we have had this incredible process for the past 3 years. We've had Coast Salish community be part of the design team, and the reason and the way we've done it for like it's almost 4 years now. The way that we've done that is we've just gone to the community. We went to Muckleshoot, we went to Suquamish, we went to Tulalip, we went to some of the urban native folks here in Seattle, and we just created this design team that has been incredible and has influenced the waterfront design in a really powerful way, I think, including having a as you come down the stairs, I'm calling them the Salish stairs. I don't know if they've actually been called that yet formally, but I think that's what they'll be called. The Salish stairs.
You keep calling it that way,
yeah, I am.
Known as it.
A lot of people are calling it that, so I don't know if they've been formally called that, named that. But you come down those Salish stairs from Pike Place Market, and there will be a big like kind of garden park area because of the influence of the Coast Salish designers. That will all be Coast Salish native plants, including and an interpretive garden there. That's just one example of the impact of having those designers as part of the group. And it's been an incredible process. I think the Seattle Aquarium will be talking more about it, especially when the Ocean Pavilion opens up on the waterfront. So thank you for asking. And it's actually it actually was quite easy to pull together that group to be a part of it. The final thing I'll say about that is we have to remember that Coast Salish design, Coast Salish community are like any of us, they're professionals and we have to pay them. So we were very clear with our designers that were part of this project that they were going to be paid well for their work and for their input on the design. And we have just a really, really happy team because everyone's getting paid, everyone's getting to have their part in it. And I think the reason I share that is a lot of time Native communities are asked to give their ideas and participate, but they are not compensated for our work. So be thoughtful about that is just my little encouragement.
Yeah, that's a great point, Colleen. I think the same goes for BIPOC organizations as well. Rob, I think this was kind of alluding to a question I was about to ask you from Jesse. So it kind of echoes Colleen's comment about the opportunity to talk about climate change impact on ocean health, which is certainly something that we're working on with the 2030 district and coastal communities. How is the Climate Pledge Arena kind of going to educate attendees who come about the great work that the Climate Pledge Arena is doing to kind of influence that as they take it home?
Yeah, I think we're starting with, basic communications, right? You've seen a lot from us this month about what we're trying to do to really ensure that we're taking good care of ourselves, our fans, and the planet. You're going to see more of that in earned media as we get closer and closer to the building opening this fall. The expectation, right, is that we're going to try our best to communicate clearly out to fans when they're in the building about some of the different initiatives that we're really working hard on, whether that's the functional zero waste components of the facility or the desire to have fans take the monorail and light rail, or as we like to say, link to the rink. There's a lot of different solutions that we're hopeful to be able to educate folks on, including things that we can do within our first of its kind Arena app that would encourage you to think about climate friendly choices by having a little green leaf next to either food and beverage choices or transportation choices or other choices that you might make. So some of those continued positive incentives. And then there's just a whole lot of things that we're going to be able to do up at Northgate at our training facility, which is just steps away from the Great Pedestrian Bridge that's going to go up in the next couple of weeks. And will be very closely linked to the brand new facility that Colleen's building across the highway from us. Lots of opportunities for us to engage the local community, not only at the arena itself, by partnering with great nonprofits and educational-based institutions to get leaders and students into the building, get them educated about our work, but also get them to inspire us to make collective change to our habits and behaviors. And then the same thing up at Northgate at the Kraken Training Center too. So, we've got big ambitions, Matthew. We're going to work really hard to have those ambitions be met with reality when the building opens this fall. But we also know we don't have the monopoly on good ideas. So as other folks come forward with good ideas, we're looking forward to evaluating those, implementing them, and just really trying to share out as much as we can to inspire our fans to continue to move forward.
Great, thanks, Rob. All right, one last question before we wrap this up for Andrea. You mentioned net zero streets. Will these areas incorporate new green spaces for the city?
That is a really great question. And yes, that's the idea. So these areas, a green and healthy street would be where a zone where we basically incentivize walking, biking, transit. We could take away general purpose lanes and so only have transit or deliveries in that area. Green spaces are going to be a big part of that. And it really depends because we might do it in a couple different areas. So like a green and healthy street downtown may look very different than a green and healthy street in South Park or in the University District, right? And we're really going to work with the communities in that local area on these design elements to make sure that it really kind of works for them. And it won't be a one size fits all, but definitely green spaces, clean air, more walking, biking, transit, and less cars is the idea.
Yeah. Thanks, Andrea. Yeah, got to get to that goal of more bioswales in the street that my board suggested. So we're at the end of the hour. I really want to thank everyone for attending today, and huge thanks to the panelists, Colleen, Andrea, and Rob. You heard Rob say that they don't have a monopoly on great ideas. Same goes for the 2030 district. So if you have some innovative things, feel free to, well, email Rob with them as well, because I'm sure he wants to hear them. But certainly email us at the 2030 district. We'd be happy to try and help implement some of these things. So with that, enjoy the rest of your day. Enjoy the weekend. Hopefully the sun will be shining. Thanks for coming. Bye, everyone.